Because if you think about the amount of lynchings that took place in the 50s and 60s, the people who lived in those communities who witnessed Black bodies hanging from trees are at the ages where, guess what they're doing now? They are senators and congressmen. They're writing policy. And these are people who grew up in communities where there was nonchalant and not a big deal to walk past a Black hanging body on their way to school. And now they're writing policy for Black bodies. And now they're passing laws for Black bodies. And now they're teaching in schools, and they are school superintendents, and they are bus drivers, and they are cashiers, and they are police officers. And if you think that that sentiment just evaporated from their soul, that the Black form has no worth, then you have a privileged position to not know what that looks and feels like.
Visit shop.mr.
How do you create an institution that dehumanizes, incarcerates, and destroys the soul of tens of thousands of people? How do you do that? And you don't undo that by in your last week giving more commutations than any other president in history. I think you have to look at these as systems of predation, right? That have fed rural communities for generations in the punishment industry, the so-called penal industry. But you have to recognize, first of all, that it is an industry, right? I think that, maybe his advisors told him that history will not look kindly on this mass incarceration. So in his last week in office, he tried to decarcerate, he would have, been in the history books for the greatest number of commutations, because I think history will have to tell both sides of that story. This thing was devised by, in large part, a man who was born in a rural community in Arkansas. And I'm speaking of William Jefferson Clinton. And born in Hope, Arkansas, rural as can be. But what he tried to devise largely succeeded in enriching rural communities for literally generations. And that was the federal support for state prison building and extended stays in prison beyond what was the norm when these things got developed. But here's the thing, Clinton did that. And when he needed these people that he helped the most, and when him and his wife needed it the most, when Hillary needed it to win her election, they, by at least the high 90s, they turned their backs on the people who gave them this largesse. And they went for Trump, And, here we are now. You cannot create workers who work in the punishment industry and expect them to be thankful for the gift that keeps on giving, the gift that feeds generations. This is a mining community, just like Greene County in Pennsylvania. They were mining communities, and they were dying mining communities. These people have the new mines. The new mines are the prisons. And they are eating steak and buying new cars and building new houses and getting cable and satellite dish reception units for their TVs. And they're living the lives of Riley because they're making an incredible amount of money, far more than their grandfathers made in the mines. The state can always outpay private industry.
These commentaries are recorded by Prison Radio.
Got to find ways to get people to see this documentary. It's one of the best I've ever seen, And the documentary is painfully clear that Lumumba was on the side of Killmonger. Congo's resources will be exploited by our people, he said. We're linking up with Nkrumah. We want a United States of Africa and sign some treaty or whatever to set that in motion. We're with Sekou Touré. Malcolm X is shown over here to be holding up that same argument that there needs to be Pan-African solidarity, a United States of Africa, and this is clearly the goal that those in power were terrified of. Yeah, there's just a lot of clarity around the United States of Africa that this was the goal, that Nkrumah, Lumumba, Sekou Touré again, and others were just very clear. It's so clear how Pan-Africanism terrifies those who rule. And they have clips of people saying they're not worried about socialism or communism, they're worried about Africanism. And at least to a large extent, not to downplay the anti-communism, but that was it. And the label of communist obviously was used to ramp up the West's self-fulfilling logic as to why they could destroy these. But that's why anybody today who is saying Black people and whoever that anyone working against Pan-Africanism is literally carrying out in the 21st century what the colonial imperial world desires at its most core. It's just so obvious. And this documentary is anyone looking to wed Black America's fate solely within the United States, anyone working within the African diaspora to highlight disunity or encourage disunity is a political intellectual descendant of the Dulles brothers who you see in here. This documentary does an amazing job of, again, clarifying how much the United States and its European allies cannot stand African unity. They fear it. They need it to be for Africans to be disunified. And they put in so much work. This documentary is off the chain. It is so damn good.
If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep moving. If you
Revolution is essentially about happiness. We have to talk about a complete and total change in the structures of this society.
Racism is so deeply embedded into the fabric of this society.
There is a proliferation of police assaults on the Black community.
The majority of the politicians in this country are there not because they feel any concern about the people who elected them, but because of their own ulterior motives.
To talk about the total liberation of Black people, we first have to liberate ourselves from the material conditions of our oppression. All people, regardless of their color, have the right to live decent human lives. When someone asks me about violence, I just find it incredible. What it means is that the person who's asking that question has absolutely no idea what Black people have gone through.
Of course, I love being a revolutionary, and I love being radical. It's important to be radical.
Ordinary people became collectively aware of themselves as potential agents of social change.
White working people should be involved in the struggle together with us, because in the final analysis, we're all struggling for the same thing.
Those who still defend the supremacy of white male heteropatriarchy had better watch out. This is just the beginning.
We have to march on with the unshakable confidence that we will win our fight for a society where freedom, justice, equality, abundance, dignity, and happiness belongs to all.
If you read this, you should read this. If you read this, you should read this. Or this. If you like this, you would love this. If you love this, you would definitely enjoy this. And absolutely get something out of this.